and welcome to our guest webinar, Setting Up for Success, the Basics for Position and Access for Communication. Good evening, and I'm Beth Waite-Lefevre, PRC Training and Implementation Specialist, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. PRC-Saltillo thanks you for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you would have trouble hearing or connecting to this class, I would ask that you check your speakers and your volume, log out and log back in. And if you still have difficulties, you can check with Log Me In, and you have the information there. Training materials in the handout section of the toolbar. I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Also, please know that the handouts will be emailed to you as well. So if you don't get them during the class, for some reason, you will get a chance to get them in an email. Also know that a feedback survey will pop up as you exit the class. We hope that you take a moment to look at that information because it really does help us look at the opportunities that we provide you if we know what you think about the trainings that we provide. Also, please note that a proof of attendance email will be delivered about an hour after the completion of this class. That will be something you can use if you are not getting ASHA CEUs, if you just need something for proof that you attended the training. We will answer questions as time allows at the end of the session. We're going to let Meredith, our presenter, have the entire time, but we'll give the last few minutes or so for questions, and we'll use that chat window for you to interact with us. Regarding ASHA CEUs, if you're taking this course for ASHA CEUs, please know that you need to submit the participation form within 15 days. We also need to make sure that you have the training date on that form. That's very important. The instructions and participation forms are in the handout section. Also, please note they will be emailed as well after the training is over. Also, go to webinar timestamps your entrance and exit from the class. So you do need to stay online the entire hour in order to get those credits. And again, just know that only if you're an SLP submitting to ASHA for CEUs that you need to fill out the ASHA paperwork. If you just need a certificate of attendance at the close of the presentation, you will get that again in an email. I want to go through the GoToWebinar training toolbar for you, just in case you're not familiar with that. Up at the top, there's a tab that says View, and there is something called Auto Hide, and that will keep minimizing this window unless you uncheck the Auto Hide. So if you want to keep that window open, you need to go in and uncheck Auto Hide. This is what it looks like if you minimize or hide the toolbar. So it's that little tiny strip there on the right. And if you click the orange arrow, it will maximize it back to the big size that you see in the left side of the screen. This is where the handouts are in that webinar toolbar. You'll see it says handouts, and underneath it, you'll see the listing of the ASHA handouts as well as the handouts for today's training. This is where the question chat box is. So this is where you will type in your questions. And again, we will get to those as time permits. And now I want to make sure and tell you some information about our awesome presenter this evening. So Meredith Hankins is a speech-language pathologist with United Ability in Birmingham, Alabama, where she's worked since 2006. Prior to coming to United Ability, Meredith served at-risk preschoolers with special needs in a greater Birmingham area public school. At United Ability, Meredith has provided services to children and their families through early learning, early intervention, and outpatient therapy programs. Through these programs, she's gained expertise in transdisciplinary service delivery and nurtured her passion for training families and teachers to enhance the communication and socialization of children. Meredith is a graduate preceptor for 2 local universities and speaks frequently on the topics of AAC and complex communication needs. She is a LAMP certified provider through the Center for AAC and Autism and a recipient of the Speech Language Hearing Association of Alabama AAC Professional Award. She also is a member of ASHA and the AAC Committee of the Speech and Hearing Association of Alabama. So I am so happy to turn this over to Meredith and let her begin her presentation.
My name is Meredith, and I'm a speech-language pathologist in Birmingham, Alabama, and Beth did a great job introducing me today. I'm excited to be with everyone and talk about something that I'm passionate about how seating and access affect AAC and its use. Let's get started. I want to talk briefly about some access methods. I think everyone is probably pretty familiar if you're looking at this, but if you're a beginner or if we just need to get all on the same page, it makes sense just to talk very briefly about access, and so that we all know kind of what we're going for when we start talking about seating and adaptations that we might need to make. Access is the method by which an AAC user is able to utilize the alternative means of communication, but there's two different kinds. We have direct selection, which involves just touching the device with your hand or your fingers or your toes or anything like that, or eye gaze or head pointing. Or you might use indirect selection, such as scanning. And on the right, we have an Accent 1000 with lamp, with an 84 key guard. It belongs to one of my little girls that you'll see in a video later on today. Her speech pathologist at her local school sent that to me. She had told her she was coming to see me that afternoon for outpatient therapy during her school-based speech session. Direct selection is just what we talked about before. It's access to a communication system by selecting the exact word or message that's desired by the user. So just touching the device, using eye gaze, which is what is in the picture on the right. It's one of my other little girls that's friends with the other device user that I showed a second ago. It's just exactly what you talk about. It's fast, it's faster, it's quick, you get what you get. It's easier that way sometimes. Touch access can be with any finger or thumb desired. It can be with one hand or bilaterally, using your thumbs to access or your hands to stabilize. It can be your middle finger or your two fingers. It can be your foot or your toes. And it's important to remember that there's no one correct way to access. We're looking at the easiest and the most efficient way for that user. So I've had a lot of people on my caseload that an OT or a teacher has gotten upset because of the way that they're accessing. They want them to access with that index finger, but that child may be more stable utilizing his middle finger. Or a lot of my kiddos like to grip the sides of their device and thumb, almost like they're texting on their devices, especially if they have really long hands. You want to find what is the most comfortable because you don't know necessarily how that child's body works all the time. So it may change throughout the day as that child gets tired or that person gets tired. It may alternate depending on what that person's wanting to say socially or how their body's positioned at that point in time. Eye gaze and head pointing are another means of direct selection. Direct selection methods that use, head pointing is a direct selection method that uses a reflective dot or tracking system to access vocabulary. It's older. I feel like it's older because I feel that I'm getting older. So it's been around for quite some time. It's older technology, but it's a very solid option for lots of users. It requires good head, neck, and trunk control for accuracy. Some people really like it because it's less visually hard on their eyes. I've gotten some feedback from some users about that for sure. So there's some different reasons that you might choose head pointing over the newer, flashier form of eye gaze, which is a direct selection method that uses an eye movement tracking mechanism. So it detects the eye movement and the dwell time on an icon, a word, or a message. And it changes all the time, I feel like. There's always something newer and shinier and faster and more accurate with eye gaze. PRC has the new look module, which is really amazing. It requires less head, neck, and trunk control. So you see a lot of users that need more support for their entire body. But I've found personally that a lot of my kiddos that get physical therapy services, even if they're not intended to be ambulatory, have get better motor strength and trunk strength, and they become better accessors. They increase their MLU, they say longer, more complex sentences, and they're just less frustrated. So we're a big advocate at our center for eye gaze users getting physical therapy or some type of core strength work regularly to make sure they can keep communicating efficiently. So this is a video showing both kinds of direct selection in one whole video. These girls are friends. They come to a language group in the afternoons after school. This was filmed this summer. They've gotten to be big buddies. Isla is blonde and she uses the, right now she's using an iPad. Her pink new accent was in an earlier picture. She's a great user. She's using the Lamp Words for Life app in this picture. She has a low incidence syndrome. And Sophie, who is also in this video, uses an Accent 1400 with New Eye. She's also using Lamp Words for Life. She has quadriplegic cerebral palsy and she's 7 years old and she's had some type of eye gaze system since she was 2.5. So we're going to go on and show this video.
What kind of dog can tell time?
What kind of dog can tell time? What kind of dog can tell time? Tell me the punchline.
A watchdog.
A watchdog. Okay. Is it Sophie's turn? All right. Sophie's turn.
To the movies.
You got to do the you got to do the joke first and then the punchline. Ask the question.
Where do cows like to go on the weekend?
Where do cows like to go on the weekend? Now here comes the punchline.
Got it.
You got to do the second part. Where do cows like to go on the weekend?
Time to get a new fence.
Nope, wrong punchline.
Time to get a new fence.
Remember, it's the same color. We color coded them. I think that one's blue.
Come.
Cure.
All right. It's right here. Go right over here. To the movies.
To the movies. Where do cows like to go on the weekend? To the movies. Okay, do you think that's funny?
Yeah.
You do? What about you? Is that one of your funnier jokes?
Fun.
It was fun. You like telling jokes, they're fun? All right, so that's a good exchange between the two of them. We were using jokes just to come back and forth and work on that back and forth exchange. Both girls are great users, but they're really used to just being asked a lot of questions, giving a lot of information versus having a conversation. So this summer we spent a lot of time working on back and forth conversations and jokes, and picking out jokes was a big fun part of that summer. Another mode of access is indirect selection or scanning. Scanning is where the items in the selection set are presented sequentially over time and the user makes a selection indirectly, typically via one or two switches. And there's different types of scanning which allow a user to receive words to be selected. So you're going to hear terms like row column or block or core scanner. And it's slow and laborious for both the user and the communication partner, but for a lot of folks, it's the only option they have for communication. So due to technology advances, scanning is the choice of communication for individuals, particularly on my caseload with both visual and severe physical impairments. We have a lot of people here at our center that are adults that started using scanning as children that have pretty good vision or fairly decent access, but at that time there wasn't a good means of access because of technology. So they continue to scan as adults because it's faster for them. So there's just a lot of different reasons that you might want to choose that. So this is Laney. We're going to talk about her a lot as time goes by. She is now 4. She's been scanning since she was about 2.5. She has quadriplegic cerebral palsy and cortical vision impairment. She utilizes Core Scanner as her language system. She has an Accent 800. And right now she's using 2-switch hold scan as her means of access. The hold kind of helps, although she likes to click along a lot, but it does speed her up just a tad. She accesses with her hand to hear her options for scanning, and she selects with her head. So we're going to watch a little bit of her. She's a smart cookie.
I've lost all, okay, you got the train. I've lost all my crayons. Oh, where can they be? I see the blue one. No, it belongs here with me. Stop.
Go. Hello. Line. Turn.
Read. I can keep reading for you. Yes, ma'am. I've lost all my crayons. Oh, where can they be? I'm listening. I see the green one. Yes, it belongs here with me. You are on fire today. What else? I stopped. More. I'll sing more. You got ready for that one. I've lost all my crayons.
Whoops. So you may see before that I said you got ready for that one. And what she did was she prepped prior. She was listening and she was thinking about what she wanted to say, and she started heading for that word. So she was doing in a great way what my mom always said that I shouldn't do, which was think about what you're going to say before you're going to say it while someone else is still talking. But she is when her body's working for her, she's a very efficient communicator. She's pretty fast and she's a good thinker. At that point, she was scanning 24 words. We moved her up a level actually last week. So she's doing an amazing job. This is a picture of my daughter. She is now 7. I think she was 5 or 6 in that picture. Yes. And I just want to talk about positioning. Typical bodies naturally support communication. So if you look at my daughter Lucy in that swing right now, she has really good head and neck control. She can hold her head up really good. In that swing that gives her virtually no support, she has good trunk and core for sitting and for phonation. She's probably yelling at me right there. Her limbs contribute to stability and balance while she's sitting and standing. So she's got everything kind of in a free fall, but she can still balance. So that shows me that her body strength, even though both of my kids are a little bit hypotonic and they're kind of weak people, we're not sporty people, she can really support herself for communication well. That's not usually the case for our complex communicators. But by giving the body the support and stability it needs, we remove an enormous barrier for access to communication. So you see my friend Ava over here in her seat. She's sitting at a 90 degree angle. Her feet are supported. Her chest is supported with this chest strap. She doesn't have her tray on, but we can't have everything in this world. And her head is all supported for her eye gaze system. So it's essential for our complex communicators to have that proper body support. We need it for comfort. Everybody needs to be comfortable when they're talking. We need it to keep everybody stable. We need it to be accurate, because that would really bog us down and discourage us if we didn't have good accuracy of access. We've got to be able to support someone so they have good stamina over a period of time. And we've got to support people's sensory needs so they stay in a state of readiness to learn. So this is a picture from Riften, because they like to sell really amazing chairs. And it's credited down at the bottom, but proper seating in the right chair is like the whole difference that it makes in good access. Stability for the communicator, his feet are are supported underneath. He's sitting at a 90 degree angle. So his bottom's all the way in the back of the chair. It has an accurate seat depth. His knees are supported. He's got good sides on his chair to give him stability. Those chairs, they're not showing it because they want to show his body, but they have a wraparound tray, or sometimes here we use wraparound tables for sensory needs and easy access. and he has chest support. So he is held in place so that his body doesn't have to do all the work of sitting and can do better work communicating and learning. He looks really good. I'll buy that chair. Seating for ambulatory individuals is just as important. I showed you pictures of Isla earlier. She is an ambulatory individual, but she requires, because of the nature of her diagnosis, good seating. The Just Right chair, it has your feet on the floor. So when I would go and do early intervention and go to daycares, and I would see kids' feet swinging or their bodies in one of those little bucket seats around a table, I would just kind of cringe because they didn't have that stability. Their bottom has to be all the way back in their seat, so they need the right seat depth. There's nothing that feels worse than all of your bottom not being able to be supported on a chair. It reaches the table, or it has a tray that allows the arms to be supported, and it's at the right height. And it has backs and sides that are comfortable and supported. And even if you don't need sides to support you physically, to kind of hem you in, sides for sensory needs on a chair are really, really needed. It's a big difference when we give someone who can hold themselves upright and sit really well, all of that supported seating. It makes them feel comfortable and secure. So one of the things that I did for a long time was I worked in early intervention. I would go out to houses and set kids up with devices or early augmentative systems. I now go into homes and do home visits for my outpatients that I serve, and trying to find them supportive seating in all environments is really an important thing. So we think about that. We need individuals to have supportive seating, and they might not have a prescriptive seat yet. So they might not have a wheelchair or a Riften activity chair or a tomato seat or whatever you want to call that by its brand name. So you want some good seating alternatives for the restaurant that's lightweight, or to grandmama's house, or the babysitter, or in the home. You might need something to use at the dinner table or on the floor. Or if you're in a school or a clinic that has limited funding or needs a variety of seating, or you have a lot of therapists in your clinic that fight over seats like they do here, you might need a lot of variety of seats to kind of make sure everyone's needs are met, or to show families what they could use at home. You want things that are affordable and they look typical and they're easy to replicate. But most of all, you want to promote that success for communication and access to learning. So this is one that I love that you'll see in some video that I have. It is a $60 Costco 5-point harness booster seat. It provides you at a near 90-90 position. It's got a pretty high weight limit, but the thing about it is that we love is that it's super cheap. It can fit underneath a table if you put it in an adult-sized chair. It is completely washable, and some of my families actually keep them in the back of their car, and they strap them to a dining table at a restaurant or at grandma's house or somewhere like that. But it's super affordable. We use it in our clinic a lot. But it's got that 5-point harness. The cons is it doesn't have a foot support, and it doesn't have something to kind of to give lateral support to your head, and it doesn't have a tray. But for $60, I can't complain. This is something that we've used for years, is the Fisher-Price Space Saver High Chair. You can get it wherever a baby item is sold. It's got a weight limit of 50 pounds. It has a weak 5-point harness. I'm not in love with it, but the back of the seat curves around and gives you some lovely support and kind of brings your hands to a midline, and which I love. Your feet can generally be on the floor or the edge of the chair, depending on your size, and sometimes we sit them on the floor, almost like a floor sitter. So they're pretty great. They're more expensive, but they're great for a little person. These are very familiar chairs. These are the Riften mealtime chairs. You see them at daycares. You see them in clinics. They don't run incredibly high in price, but they're not readily affordable for a family to always get for the size that they need for their kiddo. The current highest price is $180, but it's got a great seat depth. They're really durable. They've got a clip-on tray. They don't have any head support though, and they're not adjustable. So you can't have it all. And this is something that I want that I clearly don't have at my own clinic. This is a Rift and Compass chair. They're kind of newish. They have a higher back with high sides for support. They have a stable base with an adjustable leg height, but they are expensive. They're between $300 and $400, but they're really great for helping get the right position. With an adjustable table, it would be pretty amazing. So one of the things that I noticed when I've done some school visits is a lot of people have alternative seating. They've had it in my daughter's first grade and kindergarten class. They've had it in a lot of classrooms that I go and visit when I do support kind of visits for AAC users out in the community, and it is so fun. It provides a sensory and movement outlet while you're learning. Bouncing on a ball is great for your core. It's fantastic for kids with typical bodies. But when I see my kids that are ambulatory, that means they walk, who have hypotonia, which means they're kind of weak all over, that alternative seating can be a barrier. So you think about weak core sitting on a stool. You don't have back support. You think about sitting on a ball. You're rolling around and you don't quite have stability. You're sitting on the floor. I get exhausted sitting on the floor all day sometimes. No back support, no stability, and no secure workspace. So for our folks with complex bodies or sensory input differences or physical activity prior to sitting for academic or communication activities, you kind of need to assess what do you need to do to maximize their success. And it might not be sitting in a beanbag, and it might not be sitting on a ball or sitting on a stool. So when I went to Isla's class in kindergarten, I went in and her classroom was so fun and she had a very adaptive teacher, but I had to say, hey, I need a chair. Can you get me a regular chair? She had to go to another classroom to get a regular chair because she didn't have any, and kind of set her up for success because she needed stability, whereas other people needed movement. So here we're going to talk about seating for non-ambulatory individuals. The right wheelchair provides a complex communicator with all the same things that we talked about before. You need a stable place for their feet with foot plates or straps or shoe holders. You need a secure, comfortable place to sit with the right seat depth. So your knees shouldn't have space between the seat and the edge. So one thing that physical therapists have taught me is, like, when I start seeing that, I need to make sure that I start asking them, hey, it's time to expand that seat, to make sure that we support them. They need good back support and lateral trunk support for stability and sensory needs. They might need head and neck support and the right headrest at the correct angle. And then additionally, to continue to break up potentially high muscle tone, they might need a way to bring their arms into a midline position and secure them at rest. And that's usually with a tray. One of the things that my families joke about is I'm never without my Allen wrenches, because if I need to mess with someone's headrest or I need to mess with someone's mount, I'm not afraid to do that. And that takes time as a speech pathologist to kind of figure out, am I allowed to do that? Can I touch that? What do I need? And we're going to talk about that later. So a lot of families talk about wanting an adapted stroller early on. And so adapted seating for ambulation, like a wheelchair, can usually, at least in the state of Alabama, be purchased by age 2. And I'm in Alabama. But the seat has to last for several years if you purchase it through your insurance. And so some parents, because they're not ready, and rightfully so, to get a true wheelchair, choose an adapted stroller. Sometimes as a speech pathologist, you can have that dreaded wheelchair talk. And it often works better because you can talk about the things that you can and you will do in that wheelchair versus what you can't do. A wheelchair often provides better support than an adapted stroller because of all the things we talked about before. Adapted strollers are lightweight and fold well. They don't do a fantastic job with mounting an AAC system, especially for eye gaze, sometimes because of their slant of their leg on the stroller. You looking like a big kid in a wheelchair in a preschool or kindergarten setting. And that's one thing I talk about with parents, is that because of how marketing has happened with inclusive like cartoons and books, wheelchairs say big kid and adapted strollers often say baby, and that's something that we don't want to project with our family, with our children that we're serving. We want to provide proper support for access for communication, particularly for children with high muscle tone. So one of the things that I've had to advocate in a teaming seating situation is not getting a stroller because that stroller doesn't help break that muscle tone that I need for them to have to access well for communication, particularly for scanners and eye gaze kids. So this is Sophie. Early on, I didn't serve Sophie, and her first seat was an adapted stroller. You can see how her body looks like it's really all an extension. You can see her legs coming out. You can see her arms out. Now, she was a really cute little kid. She was super darling. But you can see how there's not a lot that her body could do at that point. She was an extension. That wheelchair, that adapted stroller did not break up her muscle tone well. Now she sits in a tilt and space wheelchair, which gives her a 90-90 seating, and it really promotes eye gaze for her. In her adapted stroller, she never could mount her eye gaze system. So we would have to take it around and set it on a table when she would come to therapy. So once she got her her regular wheelchair, when she was about, I think 4.5, they were able to write and get her something new. She was able to use her device while she was going around school and being mobile. That changed a lot of things for her, including her ability to practice language. So switch access is another thing. The placement for the method of access is really essential, and it needs to be in the easiest, most natural place of movement to make sure you're accurate. It can be anywhere that movement's volitional, and that means that person chooses to move. And one that can tolerate repetition. So that needs to be your hand, your finger, your head, your elbow, your foot, your knee, anything like that that you can move with accuracy and repetitively. The switches can have a variety of sensitivities and controls based on the system and can be adjusted to the best method of activation. So some people like to use depression, some people like to use release or hold. This is a picture of Laney and how she uses her head switch. Her family recently, and I'll talk about this in a minute, made some adaptations to her system because they're not scared at all to monkey around with things. So I'm going to move to the next slide and I can show you. Her mom and dad are very involved. They have no problems moving things on her wheelchair, moving things around. Things like that. They have built a trench for her hand. She likes to move her hand and kind of hook it. So we've got a lateral support to kind of help sometimes prevent doing that. Her switch is angled with a pool noodle and some Velcro. And then she's got another half of a pool noodle to kind of move her hand in between so she knows where to put her hand. Her mom recently, she uses some lock line to access her head switch. Her mom recently reduced the amount of lock line that was used and made it really short so that she could access with her head better, and there wasn't as much movement with the lock line because it's so adjustable. It keeps it in one place all the time and not a lot of extraneous lock line there. Additionally, instead of using a mount, her family just took the mount from the seating system and put it on her seating system's push bar. So she has very little hardware that they have to worry about mounting and moving around, which they felt was better for caregivers at her school. But it's working really well for her. And we can change it as she grows and she needs to. We won't change her mode of access, but we could change the hardware that we use to get there. So for many individuals with complex communication needs, simple play is just really, really difficult. And we all, as children, learn through play and exploration and moving physical, but physical differences remove it, remove that method of learning. So for complex communicators, regardless of the method of selection for communication, switch access gives you a means of play. Learning cause and effect is a basis for learning communication, but you may take lots of time and effort to explore those aspects. So if there may be certain external factors such as positioning or body changes that cause an impact and need to be addressed. So as some of my kids have grown and changed, as tone changed their bodies, or as just their physicality declined through scoliosis or things like that, we needed to change their access mode or change their body position and kind of make sure that we had adjusted things as things changed for their body. It's not moving. There it goes. Why isn't it moving? There we go. So this is Ellis. She is 2 years old in this picture, even though she looks very baby. She's sitting in one of our 5-point harness car seats. We're working on some cause effect switch practice. She has some really secure positioning. You don't see it, but underneath she's got a sock with some rice in it to kind of hold her little legs down. She's got switch placement for airless access. She has very, very apraxic and ataxic movement. And she has hypotonia, which means that her body is very weak. She and her brother both have a low incidence syndrome. And so we don't really know what's expected long-term for them, but working on access was something that we wanted to do for play and as a basis for communication.
Good job. What happened? Good job. You did it.
Okay, so that was Ellis doing some switch practice. She also has her switch kind of positioned with some lock line and a clamp, which is super cheap to have around. I think that lock line situation cost about $29. She has a jelly bean switch that's connected to our CPU with a computer switch interface. Then she's accessing a program called Help Kids Learn, which has an annual subscription and has a lot of cause effect programs or scanning programs, and a lot of play for kiddos that need that kind of interaction. So all of those things, it took a lot, and also she was using one of our smart boards, but all of those things together create a situation that allows her to have some accuracy with her play. Whoops, we already watched that. So this is one of the mounts that we use oftentimes with our kids. I think it's made by, oh gosh, just left me. It'll come to me in a second. The best position for a communication system is where the least amount of effort is for that user. An AAC user might want a touch-based system lying flat or an angle depending on their vision or physical needs. Eye gaze or head pointing systems are position dependent. So they need that consistent angle every time. And your PTs and your OTs are essential in aiding that selection to make sure that that the three of you pick the right situation for mounting and access. So we can talk about that. Or not. There it goes. So a lot of times I might, when I write a funding packet, I might choose some additional mounting systems. AAC users are positioned in a lot of different ways at home. So you might want to consider how to accommodate those positions for lying down or sitting in a tumble form or a tomato seat, sitting in an adapted chair at the table to eat dinner, things like that. So you want a mount for mobility, like a wheelchair mount or a mount for your walker. You might want a mount for sitting or standing or lying down, like a floor mount or a table mount. So we typically, when we write packets, and it's mostly funded where we are in our state, a means of communication for eye gaze, at least, that provides some sort of position in their chair, but then additionally position to support positioning somewhere in the home that isn't in their wheelchair. Mobility access too is a factor. AAC users need to be able to carry their device with them all the time. So you need a comfortable shoulder strap. Individuals who are ambulatory need to transport their own system. So they'll need a carry strap, that handle, a mount on their walker, like we talked about before. But then the weight of the system needs to be a factor when you're choosing all of that. So sometimes an iPad might be the lightest option that you can get. It just really depends. Now I know that the Accent 1000 is a very similar weight to an iPad with a chat wrap like the Prio. So that kind of takes away that that dance of what kind of size what kind of weight you want, but you might have that when you're looking at different systems. This is a picture that reflects some collaboration that we've had here recently. We have a multidisciplinary team at our clinic. This is one of our OTs helping me do some positioning with a friend. He is in an adapted stroller, but he's a very, very young fella. And his family definitely feels more comfortable with something that is foldable at this point. Multidisciplinary teams are just essential for the success of complex communicators. So when you're collaborating, you want to use words like, I need him to be able to do this, or can we make something happen that does this? And making people aware in other disciplines of what you need will really help them help you better. And the same thing goes for them, helping educate them about points of access and what you're doing will also kind of keep the team flowing. But it's really fun having all of those discussions. Just a refresher, and this is my sweet friend Christie in the picture on the right. She texted me the other day after doing a complex seating situation, and she said, I just love our time together, and I couldn't decide if that was sarcastic or not. Physical therapists prescribe seating and supported standing. They provide therapeutic support that keeps in mind long-range communication goals. And collaborative physical therapists will consult with the SLP or the teacher about communication needs and about how seating and supported standing are affected. So it's helpful for PTs to remember that working on unsupported sitting might not be the best time to work on access because your body's not supported. So having that conversation a lot with a physical therapist and reminding them along the way, hey, we might not want to always work on blank or while we're working on sitting independently, or we might want more chest strap while we're working on academic work or working on communication exchanges, so that everyone has a goal in mind of what they want the situation to look like. Having a balance with that is really important. OTs provide support for access and adaptations for access. They work on trunk and your upper body and your arms. They provide in-depth information about sensory regulation, and that is a huge piece of what we need to get folks in a state of readiness to learn. But a collaborative OT will help you formulate this plan for sensory regulation, curriculum access, communication access, and they'll provide therapeutic support that promotes access. So a good OT that co-treats with you or helps you might really be great about, I want to give you great support through your arms. I want to make sure that I'm working you through your upper body so that those arms get nice and strong for quicker access. I want to work on independent, I want to work on some trunk support. And if we're working on that, you become stronger in your core. or I want to make sure that everything sensory is regulated so that we can get maybe 20 to 30 minutes of a good communication exchange. All of those things are so important. I gotta love a good key guard. They divide icons and they promote accuracy of access, consistency of motor plan, and sensory feedback to locate icons. And my friends that use key guards and don't have physical or vision impairments say that the sensory feedback of it is almost essential. They allow tablet-based systems to appear different from a leisure tablet. So if you're trying to make an iPad look less iPad-y, for lack of a better word, then you can use a key guard and maybe that masks that a little bit. So I really do love a key guard and a touch guide, whichever one you feel like is best at that point. Cases for iPads need to be durable, have amplification ability, they need to be lightweight, they need to support a key guard. They need to have a secure way to stand the device at an angle if that's a preference for that user. And I have yet to find a perfect commercially available case for an iPad, one that's affordable for everybody, one that can use a key guard, one that has amplification, and one that's lightweight. There's aspects to lots of different ones that I love, but not everything's perfect in this world. That's a chat wrap on the side. It might actually be part of a dedicated device that PRC sells called a Prio. But it does not have a key guard in this picture. It's got lamp words for life on the screen. One thing that we really look at is power and volume. Lately, I've been going and doing school system visits, and a lot of people have been turning off volume for kids to keep them from talking out of turn during circle time, or thinking that the sound is too noisy or whatever, but for whatever reason. Most high-tech systems have the capability to last 8 hours, but you might need the system charged during the middle of the day. Maybe the battery's getting a little bit inefficient, or maybe you've got a chatty person, you don't know. But it's best for the system to be charged nightly and powered off every few days. But it's important that the volume be up at all times, loud enough for others to hear, and for that user to receive the auditory signal. So just like what I was saying, you never turn off a system's volume because the user's speaking at the wrong time. You help that user learn when they need to speak. So here's the total picture. We want access to communication to be as easy as possible so that communication can be as complex as possible. Communication needs to take place in all areas of our life. So at home, out in the community, at school, at work, all of those places that are important to us for connection. That communicator's needs for access and positioning are the priority over therapeutic and academic goals. So remembering that we're not working necessarily on index pointing or how many words in a sentence, but we're working on access, positioning, and that exchange of communication. And we need to all work together to make sure that we're hitting everything that we feel that we need to hit as users, families, caregivers, and other therapists and professionals. And I'm open. I have about, according to Steve Jobs' time, I have 10 minutes for question and answer, if that's something that we want to talk about, or if you'd like me to talk about more about caseload or things like that. I can watch your questions.
Hey, Meredith, we do have a few questions, and I just want to remind folks that are staying on for ASHA CEUs that you do need to remain on the line for the entire hour, so we still have some time here for questions, so that's awesome. Somebody asked about your joke page. So, Meredith, did you create a joke page under sentences and then color code, or could you explain a little bit about how you do your joke?
I went to, both my girls that use jokes use lamp words for life, and we went under like, because that's where funny is. And there's a lot of room under that page. And we read a joke book together and we selected jokes from that. And then I programmed them in. And so each joke, the joke itself is one color. And then I make a space for, I skip an icon space just for accuracy. And then the next space is the punchline, and it's the same color. So Where do cows like to go on the weekend is blue, and the punchline to the movies is also blue. And I believe, I can't remember, it's an early reader joke book. I'd have to look at it on Amazon, and I could get that back to Lisa, to Beth, but we just used a really simple joke book and picked them. It was just an activity that we did over the course of a couple of sessions.
Okay. There was another question about recommending the mount, and here's kind of the issue, is that typically if you're going through a funding source, oftentimes they will only approve one mount. So have you gone into that, and how do you prioritize which mount you're going to recommend and go through for funding?
How do you recommend that and go through that for funding if you only can get one?
Yeah.
Then the amount that you need to get at that point is probably going to be a wheelchair mount if that person is not ambulatory. And it sounds like if you're needing more than one mount, that person isn't ambulatory. And that's unfortunate. Sometimes, and that would be what I would do, because funding wise, at least in our state, you need to prove that person can access in all environments. Now, that means that person's not going to be able to access lying down. But unless that person is only going to access from their bed, unless they're really sick or they don't leave their hospital bed often, something like that, you would probably pick the option of mobility and talk about it from that perspective. And then you might have to look at local funding sources. Sometimes there's grants, things like that, if you wanted to get an additional mount, like a table mount or a floor mount. Or you might need to wait 5 or 6 years and make sure that mount's still in good condition, and then look at the next funding cycle that you look at. There's just different things. Different states have different rules about what they're going to pay for and what they're not. And it still surprises me that in my state that's actually funded, but right now it is. It might not be tomorrow.
Okay. And I know I've also worked in schools where maybe the school might buy the floor stand.
Right.
Sometimes, the student comes to school with their mount on their device, and then they take the device off and put it on a floor stand if they're in different positions.
Right. It just really depends on that school and what their funding level is and how they feel, what they're used to buying equipment wise. That's not something that's common in my experience, but it might be in another state. But usually what I've seen lately is we've gotten floor mounts for home because of the bed, because of the tumble form or the bean bag or the recliner or something like that. So
okay,
not those things.
Another question: do you have any tips for working with kids with autism who have pretty close to typical physical course accuracy, but we are working on?
How much time do you have? What is that? You're fading out, Beth.
Oh no, it's a question about helping kids with autism who are pretty close to typical physical core strength and accuracy, but are working on turn taking and learning the power of communication.
Say that again, because you faded out one more time, and I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it says, do you have any tips for working with kids with autism who have pretty close to typical physical core strength, but are working on communication turn taking and are learning the power of communication?
Well, I mean, if you feel like that person has good access and you're looking at the social aspects of communication, I really would make sure that individual has great sensory regulation. So you're going to work on that readiness to learn, making sure that all of your sensory system is, all your sensory needs are met, and making sure that motivation for those social exchanges are there. And so we have a lot of social groups here, but a lot of our kids that we put in social groups are sensory-based communicators. That means really what they want to talk about is what feels good. So if you're looking at kids that still are in that stage of, I want to talk about that spinning top, or I want to talk about that bubble machine, or I want to talk about that light up toy or that music that you're playing. And I have video of that, but I can't really pull it up right now, but doing activities that are based on pleasure is what would promote the most sensory, the most social exchange that you could get. After you've met their sensory needs, you're giving them a highly, highly motivating activity, you're going to get some great language from that.
Okay. There's a question wanting to know what your co-treatment sessions look like for PT, OT, and speech.
Messy, really, really messy. Usually it's just the most fun ever. We're a very close group of people, and so I'm lucky because I have OTs and PTs that really respect speech pathologists and vice versa. And I've also had the privilege of working on a multidisciplinary team for 15 years now. So getting to do that, I've learned a lot of tricks and a lot of things that they've taught me over time. And them too, they're all pretty good AAC users themselves, and good facilitators. So I'm lucky in that regard. But it's a lot of give and take. And so usually before, in the 3 minutes that I might have to grab something, because we're all living a real life here and I have a real life caseload with real life productivity goals and real life paperwork, that usually in that 3 minutes before, somebody will say to me, hey, what do you want to work on today? And I'll say blank, and I'll say, hey, I want to work on, I've got 6 core words I want to work on, and I want to work on some regulation. And they'll say, hey, I want to work on core strength. Can we sit on the peanut? And I'll say, sure, I think I can position that pretty well. And then we'll go forth and we'll do that, and then we'll take turns. And they'll look at me and say, hey, are you ready to do something for yourself now? And I'll say yes, and then they'll support me. And it's a back and forth dance, but it's taken time and years and respect and all of those things. But it's really great. It's probably one of the best things that I have going for me right now.
Awesome. Okay, we have a couple more that are about kind of the positioning. I know you worked a lot with early intervention, but someone mentioned that they have older students who maybe didn't have access to older intervention when they were young.
Right.
So do you have any suggestions or ideas for what this would look like with teenagers?
Yeah, and we have a lot of kids that come to us in adolescence who have never had a supported seating system, who have never had a communication system. So really working on those, just the same way that I would have worked on things early, a lot of times I have to go back and work on those same things later. So I'm working on making sure that everyone has the seating that they need. If they need, a good supportive wheelchair, making sure they've gone through seating clinic, making sure that everything's functioning that way. But then additionally, I really work on sensory regulation, readiness to learn. And by that point, everybody that I've got a lot of times has a certain degree of learned helplessness. And that means that individual just really, really struggles with understanding that they're being heard. And so we're going back and really working on building confidence in that communicator. So everything that person does, they touch the device one time, and I'm going to really respond to whatever was said. They make a move towards it or towards an icon, but then they draw back. I may go on and reward them even for that movement. So anything like that, I'm just really building up that relationship of, you say something, it means something to me. So I'm working on all of those early foundations of communication the same way. They're just bigger.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a great way to think about that. So another question we have has to do with fatigue. When you work with students with complex needs who maybe have one access method in the morning, but then throughout the day they start fatiguing, would you consider a different access method in the afternoon?
Would I consider a different access method in the afternoon?
Yeah, like if they can't maintain
Probably.
access throughout the day.
I would need to look at their overall access and what their easiest form of access looks like is what I would probably want to look at. I would look at, because if they're fatiguing and there's something, and if they're fatiguing and there's a reason that they're fatiguing, then I need to look at what is the most easy form of communication that I can give you that you can master throughout a day is probably what I'm going to do. I'm not going to choose something hard in the morning and then make you relearn a new motor plan that afternoon is more than likely what I'm going to do. That's generally what I've leaned towards. The only time I've ever not done that is with Sophie, and I showed lots of pictures of her. She early on had a different device with a different language system, and we moved her to LAMP with an accent around 4.5, something like that. And she utilized multiple different language systems on her previous device, which made me pretty crazy, and did it well. But when she was sitting less supported, she used larger icons. It was not my favorite, but it worked for her because she's so bright. But it would always be preferable that you choose a language system and a point of access that meets your needs throughout the day.
Okay. It is a little after 6, so if you need to leave now, you are able to do so. We've got a couple more questions. I think we'll see if we can get Meredith to answer those for us. And if anybody still has a couple questions, then feel free to ask. One of the questions we have on here, Meredith, is what do you suggest to use for recess time for mobile children?
What do I suggest to use for recess time for mobile children? For access for communication? That's a tough one because a lot of kiddos who are out on the playground are too busy working on their body to climb, things like that, or to run or swing or whatever they're doing to access. So a lot of and then there's the glare on your system. So some kids that we have take a static board outside. Some of my kids have enough verbal speech that they don't bother with anything. And sadly, recess is 15 minutes. So it's hard. Recess and PE are kind of hard to accommodate in my experience. It's noisy. There's a lot of background noise. There's a lot of physical activity. My kids that get adaptive PE tend to do the best with maintaining their communication system through it. But my kids that go to typical recess. Where'd you go?
Meredith?
Hey, are you there?
Hey, Meredith.
Hey.
Okay, you're back.
But it's hard. Physical education and recess are hard. So it seems to me that it's always something that you kind of have to adapt based on that year, based on the social needs of that child. So you might use a static board. You might use pictures on a ring. That person may take their communication device outside. So it just really depends on that user. You're going to have to be creative in that regard. But, and I hate to say it, sometimes PE is short, and it just really depends on the supports that child needs during PE or recess too. And I'm not saying don't take it, because I think you should. I think that it's just hard.
Okay, we just have a couple more, and I think we'll be done for the evening. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Meredith. I know everyone has appreciated it. Lots of great comments we're seeing here. One of the questions that someone asked was if you've ever used a weighted blanket to help with positioning or stability, it says.
I do. I've used a weighted sock, and I used that in a video with Ellis, but I've used a weighted sock. I've used weighted blankets. Now they're hot, and I don't use weight for very long, and your OT will talk to you about that because there's rules that they have about how long you can put weight on someone and what amount. So you've got to use all of those things very carefully with some help from your OT. But I've used it when I'm learning an activity, or I'm learning and I'm trying to figure out someone's body, but I don't use it permanently. I might use it during while I'm trying to figure someone's body out or their sensory needs, but not forever.
Okay. Someone wanted to know if your videos were on YouTube. They'd like to show them to their students.
They are not. Those videos are property of our agency, and they are released only to PRC by the family. Okay. All right. Last question. It says, what would you suggest for a student who can't hold her head up and cannot hold her gaze? She's using partner-assisted scanning. They've attempted switches at different places with little luck. Wow. And so one of the things that I've been really, really thinking about lately and been reading about is just the power of switch play. And that doesn't mean that you're going to take away language and not do partner-assisted scanning, even from a model perspective, which is super powerful because you're pouring in all sorts of great stuff and great language into somebody. But giving someone the power of errorless play is a huge foundational thing. And so I think it's, I know that Carol Goosens had some research about this, but I also know that, I'm trying to think who else has had some studies about the power of just doing lots and lots of switch play. And so doing that for sure with something motivating, whether it's switch toys or it's something like Help Kids Learn, or you know, games from RJ Cooper if you still got them, things like that. Doing some things that are highly motivating with switch play is a very useful thing to teach for learning. And the same thing with eye gaze and play for eye gaze too, using Tomoko or Look to Learn, things like that, to give someone that power of, I look at something, something happens. You don't get that as a young child or even as a person with play. You miss those stages when you have a complex body.
All right, that sounds wonderful. Meredith, thank you so much. I want to remind people, please complete the survey for us if you would as you leave the webinar. Remember, if you are doing ASHA, you have 15 days to send in your completed forms, and you will get an email with that if you weren't able to download that during the actual presentation. And with this will be posted on YouTube as well, so you can share that with your colleagues and families. And once again, I want to thank Meredith on behalf of PRC-Saltillo. We were so pleased to have you here this evening, and everybody have a good evening.
Thank you. I don't know.